that treasure trove, just fantastic, the state during war activities. Started digging some more. Connecticut has a World War I material. We have outside more. The Kansas City has collection, but as functions are collected in the country. George Goddard, librarian during World War I, where we are, where the building, and he was. That's what our current order. He could get his hands on, and so he became a war, actually a militarized area from the Department of War Records. Goddard did so in 1919, the general created the war records at the state library. That the state library was for collect record of World War I. The government did, that individuals and organizations, that statute we are still collecting. One. But we can't turn the lights off. Can or no?
The camera can't see you.
Should I go somewhere else for the? I don't know. And I apologize that I can't make the images. So some of the Goddard brought in things like the first colors in somebody's snapshot. I don't know who the very first marched in France. The next one. I forget which transport ship's bringing catalog to, which I always have because they have no ideas. And card catalog still has original. A lot of the things in this catalog there, they have not been elected. And if you can see it, you can't look up world heading because these cards, it's still called the European. So I had to do these, and we found that no one has looked at because they're in the next. Complete records of the 26th Division was the National Guard troops. General Edwards, the commander of the 26th, it's to the state library. Goddard made copies of them, records down to Washington. We had a copy and give them back. And no, you're going to have to come. So we still, no one has looked at these sorts of stuff. This is actually of Home Guard and you name it. And then I have no idea who these three likely 102nd Infantry Regiment, Major Regiment. We also had machine gun companies, but the one were the guys. We've got, it's 109, totals out to about 1,000 pages. Records that the state of Connecticut are. The military census, which were used in creating everyone a second together. The current made a habit of draftees in front of the hall where they went. When I'm talking to students, because these boys were going on. Go. This, if anybody watched last week on the Great War, of our photos in there, this was one of them. This is the crowds seeing the things like this anymore. Of Hartford turned out leaving. This is one of my favorite. In March, it was they remodeled it. They dug big holes, cars and bikes. Tens of that, or they're tens of thousands in the park watching kids up in trees watching. Brand new tanks in warfare. Really big deal. And as you can see, that's one of the cars. We'll go quickly through these. This is as in a picture because these were the Italians Club of Hartford. Cross. Group of Red Cross women. State Fair in 1980. Relief tent. Plane crash. My grandmother, who grew up here, remembers her saying when she remembers being terrified flying overhead. I know what it was for. It was actually the Army did. For some reason, she had never seen a plane, seen an airplane at this. So to have one crash, big deal. Go ahead. So this is a hero at this point. Understood that were important. Fantastic, but he said, we want those, our children and their grand know what Connecticut has done. He kept all this stuff. And that's really taken lead on commemoration. Go ahead. Goddard photos, remember photostats, they were black and white. That's how he got those 26th Division, but that was the technology. Go. Bring this into the 21st century. Running the Remembering Preserving Memories project, kind of built. Instead, we use high-end camera scanners, and iPads. The public to bring us their photos, their helmets, their letters, their. As long as it's not weapons, we can't do. And this is what Bill had covered when we were in North Haven. We're in October, and so this allowed high-resolution copies. That had been brought down in Frankfurt grabbed the fabric covering this. Go ahead. And then a soldier from farming, traditional German helmet. That's kind of why. The other big why Connecticut. I learned, and I am not a World War I scholar before I started, remarkable during the war. Light years ahead. Part of that of democracy. It's 7% of the small arms measured here in this, and that's the small arms munition forces. is a wonderful video of a machine gun at both. We're not going to play it though. We have the repository for the Colt patent firearms manufacturer. These great, like this one for, I think it was Vickers machine guns, real government of Russia. And so and the insurance documents from Colt was making.
The Vickers were made Colt?
Yep. Was making Vickers. They did a few. The Colt was doing. Colt had building at this point, and just to even try. Underwood typewriter retrofitted their factory to arms. The Colt plant in Meriden, my uncle worked there. Everyone that could firearms or ammunition. So Connecticut, as early as 1940, was supplying arms. 14 and 15 was ramping up, which need for workforce. Had more immigrants coming to this outside. Connecticut preparedness movement. Found really interesting. Last week talked about parade in June City. There were 100 that went to this parade that the United States for war. They needed, at that point we weren't. We were still kind of in our own, and this was a war far, and I mean Wilson won on the platform of he kept, so Teddy Roosevelt of preparedness, men in Connecticut. Men paid for what were called so college would go to the Plattsburgh camp by these wealthy businessmen, learn how to become officers. Came along, they would have to become officers. So Hartness Parade. People marched in this parade. Men from the Order of lost, and there would have been 19,000 people parade in Hartford. Now, still a small city. 1,000 people came to only got 150,000. You know, it says a lot about our. And this is in Hartford, and that's right across the street from the. So Mexico in 1916. Yay! Everyone knows that fact. We sent in the 2nd Regiments down. They never got to do anything. Go ahead. Was actually the one leading Army troops in Mexico, which.
That was the border.
Yes, and then what prompted the National Guard troops for New Mexico. So the National Guard troops, there we went. So from a gentleman whose grandfather was a soldier from in Nogales, about 300 images from Nogales, and this is. And it shows the between America and literally a line in the pictures that show Mexican, and 3 feet away were the Americans. Go ahead. Hartford Current was also the first order. Go ahead. Tyler Bliss on the daily. Go ahead. Bunny. They did nothing but marched, and they drilled, and they marched, they drilled, and they marched. In the pictures from that. Go ahead. They were really bored. We have to the next one. Yeah. Sensations there advertises for wife, drug raid. Actually was in all sorts of trouble when he came home. So we have this who donated his from Meriden, this diary and the picture side. On each that lower, we didn't know who it was. Learned stuff, we see that exists. Merritt Learned, his picture. So with that identified in that picture and some other pictures eBay. So as big as it was, and especially here in Connecticut, go ahead. The other big thing, the early days, was Governor Holcomb. An interesting man. He was 70. He was from Southington. He proposed census in February. In this census, it was on the left, like, you know, what's your name? If you have a second occupation, anything else, what's that? Are you a citizen of the United States? And then questions like motorcycle. Can you ride a whole wireless? Part of the reason he did this, where the main. He wanted to, what was available to work in the factories, sacrificed to go to France was instated. To do an industrial army, they could preserve munitions work in industry. He's got involved, and census, according to your occupation and that nationality, because once, go ahead, keep going. Holcomb. Teddy Roosevelt at one point. Warrens made it back to the state under armed guard lists. And so town in this broken down by alien status. collecting peach pits for gas mask filters. Gas. Shifts that we really saw, especially the African Americans coming up from work in the factories. Bridge size in 19 because the munitions industry much help. And that changed the face of some of our Hartford, Waterbury. And women had always worked, did so because you needed the money. Women got into the factories, what they could do. Go ahead. And Works, who was making gas, long list of socialites in the factory. Go ahead. To show off as well at the State Fair, exhibition of Connecticut. You can see there's Zeppelins being made. There were equipment being made in was making trepanning drills to people's skulls. The exhibition hall had people visit. Go ahead. These are products that were made. Guns, lots and lots. Go ahead. So I brought here and stories from over there. Go ahead. Protecting the Homefront became a guard in Middletown. Pictures of Cheshire's Home Guard that was established in, and there were about lined up on the first day. So if anybody has pictures, and for River Patrol, they donated the use of their patrol because there was such sabotage on the river. The Historical Society has great water. To get near the waterfront, you need. And this, I love this Home Guard troops training. You would never in years today. And then propaganda. And you could not get away from. And it was especially in 1915, I didn't raise my boy to be a soldier. 1917, dissent. I think because Connecticut was playing in the munitions movement, it was to dissent against the war, and was a big part of that. Council for Public Information. Connecticut had our own George Creel, and propaganda was everywhere. So all of the stores had posters and propaganda in the windows. These are very recognizable. The way Germans were, these skins and brutes and to scare you. They were just of what they did. Go ahead. Great example of a store for the depictions. And they Sage Allen G. Fox, their window display. So this is one of known, your troops. This is the Yellow Ribbon Bar of 1970. And this, the most famous World War I for Belgium. And then the others, you know, more at women or these posters. Food coming 100 years ago was a push for gardens. Every event given to planting gardens. There wasn't going to be enough food. There's eat your food. Please to win. Join the YMCA and to give as well to the Liberty Loan campaigns. It even in the paper as being somewhat patriotic. Yeah, and encouraged to save. At the Kiwanis Club, they sold a brick to raise money for the. I don't know what happened to that one. Oh, and again led over single Liberty Loan campaign. Aetna, Travelers, and the kick in $100,000. Even Cheshire, every campaign. And this is, you know, loving posters. The towns have cottages. This one was out in front of Old State House, Waterbury hunting in Hamilton Park. I've never found any information. The centers of activity. And this is just a great image inside. And this is a place we held our own. That what women really laid the ground and getting the right to vote if you. I just opened a new exhibit about World War I. Organizations, Red Knights of Columbus, were in soldiers' lives. Provided all sorts of sporting equipment, the Salvation Army donuts, the donuts for the soldiers. Liberty loans, 5 of them, and what funded the war. The bill outright states were subscribed, then paid the money to the government, funded the war. Again, gave lots and lots of like bill allies as well. War. One of my favorites, this 95-year-old woman, this was her aunt, and we have this time in France. She was in, and because women do a lot in the front, we weren't allowed to be as yeomen, but we didn't get dished out, and so women, we were just like, they were really the first women, and they served as bilingual on the front line. When you read about them in Chicago and as well. And until 1970, recognized until I think it was this, were involved. Girl Scouts, the jewelry, go ahead. Knitting bees. Women got to learn MCA about how to drive an ambulance. And it was this, and could do this. And then food, I love food history. The April, I made some great World War I. Wheatless Wednesdays, porkless, you would serve everything you could. And again, it was women driving. Stories from over there. These are every day I get these stories, digitization events. I get to walk in their footsteps next April. So was a touring very last day of the war. Didn't find out for 6 months. Home from Boston, their son, it was 6 months after they learned that his great nephew, who actually to run the youth assistant parks, and he's now down in Guilford, that were written. And there's a plaque up in Torrington has his name. Go ahead. And then American 2 years ago, skip through it so it doesn't try and play. It's a 22-minute documentary. He is buried, and by American Battle Monuments did one of our programs. Actually, we're going to be screening that Historical Society. A member of the 107, the great nephew, will all be there for. This is all stories. Jacobton soldier, person to come in through the project, and created his entire collection because he had no children, so he found 2. And go ahead. Terry in July, and they did not think he picked up all of his belongings and shipped it home to his family. And there it stayed. Jacob Bernasconi never, nor did his. So when Howard brought it to us, in there. Go ahead. Oh, that's skip. There were a pair of these shoes. There was a grenade, a flashlight, all of the things that he had on the day he was wounded, still in that box. He also, he walked with a limp. He was a member of the American, went to France with the Legion. He was wounded, so I guess 1940, can't do math at the moment. He fell down the stairs. He was some exploratory surgery. He pulled out of a piece of shrapnel. Go forward. So that shrapnel there, his pelvis. And that doctors put it in, some high resolution imaging of blood on the guard. This was a piece of was something and saved. You know, I'm sure it was but it was a memory he did because of what it and what this war was. This was in his. We have his driver's license from. Go ahead. scrapbook that he brought home to France in 27. Some poppies from Chateau Thierry. And this is that on the right. Go ahead. Sergeant Middletown, action on April 20th, Seicheprey. A gentleman that came into one of our and brought in his diary to join Lieutenant Carruth and found him with about 17 2nd and 4th platoons. Line all morning in which Cedarholm was killed, 4 of our men. To link these different stories, soldiers were able to link these. Being able to show this to Holmes' descendants is really a powerful thing for us, as is Seicheprey. This is troops were involved in. Pershing called it, did not like General Edwards. A Pershing battle in the midst of October of 18. However, first time American troops, they at 3 o'clock, April 20th, go ahead. Oh, go. I recently found the National Archives and Delta Company from the 100s. 2 companies, barbed wire, skip it though, because in the Moose, I can't speak French, that section of France. In the morning, there were about 300 in this, or what were referred to as, when 3,500 Germans, it was the first time, and I brought Strickland, who wrote about in his writes, we rushed, which were nearly leveled off by the places behind the dugouts, looking quite a heavy mist or fog in the war. The Germans were throwing hand grenades, and we could judge how narrowly the way twigs were snapping. About this time, there were about 15 Germans in single. The leader who beckoned us to come, our answer was a bugler Brindley, Sergeant Ashley, Janswick, and Cahill, as fast as they could work their bowl. Indian fashion, fire out before they could draw a bead on. Still continued with unabated trees, iron, what not was heard, to come pounding down upon our. There's a story that about one of the cooks in Charlie Coast when he was attacked by the flamethrower. Cleaver and joined the Germans with his, go ahead. So this tiny little town, every building was rebuilt. And if any of you have ever been to in West Hay, this painting by John Whiting over here, you Sergeant, get into this. How many of you? All about Sergeant Stubby. He was the mascot of a little pit bull that was held by a New Britain soldier. And he asked at Seicheprey, he was able to warn, and he ended up being highly decorated. He was, by General Pershing, became the mascot, the town Hoyas. And to put it politely, wrapped and put over a mold, Indian Museum of American History. He did not make it. A lot of Stubby, because we're doing a gateway drug. It's aren't into history to because it's and there's an animated view of grandchildren them to see this because we're partners. One of the war artists were commissioned rendition of one of the panoramic photos right after the battle, which was go ahead. Actually found from a German, and that is with American soldiers. Really look at because it makes me gonna ball like a at Seicheprey, April 20th to battle and remember. So Connecticut lost that morning. Another 150 were killed. The Germans, oh, there's all sorts of varying. Most of the accounts higher than ours managed to hold the after what was left of the Germans. How I'm not sure, but so Seicheprey that was given in people of Connecticut, and there's a great little. So those stories, I'm going to go quickly through the time, and I guess I didn't. That picture's actually, it became national policy that if you were German, you needed to register. Could not live within a half mile. So 1917, thousands and thousands evicted from their homes in Bridgeport cities because they lived of one of the munitions. Connecticut against Germans, who they actually lynched a man. However, Middletown seemed to be the most anti-German. The only violence I found was there. After the Swan, men went out, got drunk, Herman's house, and dragged house and made them kiss the Americans. They were all arrested, they were fined, but the city had all of their legal fees. A lot of that German sent to fuel the Americanism. There was a push to become American. Classes were held, and I did a zoom in on this. To teach you how to speak American. Really can't see it, but there's a Americanization of huts. I'm not aware of any, but only those we had during the war here. And For the most in Cheshire, we're learning it. I know my grandparents, well, my grandfather during the war, but I think most of them learned English. I've never found Americanization classes here in town. For of American, which was all filmed in 20. There's one at the, and it's about an here and English, so he can't get a job, and life just won't work for him. A sign about learning. He learns English, and next thing you know, he's bossing all these other people. It's a propaganda, very, very popular. And again, that's one of the places he really was out.
I know my grandfather, when he came, there was no Italian. They had to speak. They were considered American.
Yeah, my mother, none of them ever learned Italian. So coming home, and I think, yes. So one of the ways the men and women who serve, direct honor rolls. And these boards, and this was facing Route 10. Actually did have 2 women as nurses and Etta Clark. Go on. Parade every 10. I've never found, again, a parade. Paper accounts, and Cheshire didn't get covered in, or the Meriden, it's harder to find information. That was Sergeant in the parade. There. Oh, yeah. Yay, study. Connecticut also awarded to each of the soldiers. Medal. Cheshire was not one of towns, just the big towns, basic kind of town produced. Impact were the memorial. These were American Legion posts because of World War I. Out of a group called, and the active duty Americans after the war to American Legion. So as it originally stood, for any of you from Foot Street, that's Foot Street behind, and I know the town that just refurbished, right? The last thing, really one of the most that we did was this again was something with, and Connecticut was one did this. Virginia or the other 3. My colleague actually wrote he went through every, and or the other 3 states. The first page, which it got basic, who are your parents, born, biography. Second page is your war record. Your name, Raymond Queenan. Go ahead. Page is more of your war. Where were you? What wounded? So here, asked again, and then home from. The 4th page was the page asked things like if impressions were made upon you by, and Ray Queenan's the most touching. He said, but I was afraid to show, killed that I lost all fear of death was the thought of how to receive notice of my death, and did not fill this, and just ignored, didn't want anything of it. Count these as they were done as soldiers. They were not done. Their memory has softened right at the time. Overarching is that Sherman was right. Go ahead.
It's interesting that additional. This was my last year. Absolutely. This time, who stayed? The boys fought.
And those are actually all history.com, library's website for free. That's it. I can and on and on. I love, and that's so perverse, World War I, but I love bringing it to the most of us, especially we didn't learn about this war, class period. And as teachers, because they don't think it's as, but really, if it wasn't for World War, we're experiencing in our world today, the direct result of the border, the alliances, the similarities are disturbing. Studies history, but I want to tell the story to help people. So please, if any of you, let me know at this project, one project. We're actually going to be in Middletown having a digitization day on Thursday. We have all sorts of programs coming up. We're sponsoring all sorts of book talks. If any of you have ever read Andrew Carroll's books, he does books on war letters. We have him coming to speak in Hartford and New Haven next week on his new book about Pershing's war letters. We've got film showings, we've got speakers, we've got a ton of stuff, and we're looking for more stories to tell.
We should do a World War I roadshow.
Well, that's
because people will come up with their stuff.
And that's kind of what these digitization days are. And as I said, we will be here at Cheshire Public Library on, I think it's October 5th. So please bring out whatever World War I stuff you've got. We'll scan it, we'll photograph it, we'll talk to you about what you've got, and then that'll become part of the digital archive.